From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Coming up today, K-State's Glynn Tonsor. On this week's cattle market segment, he'll remark on what the USDA's latest cattle on feed report suggests about the economic returns to feeding cattle for the remainder of this year. And he'll go over the latest beef export volume numbers for the first quarter of 2019. Then K-State's Jaymelynn Farney will discuss mineral supplementation for the cow herd on summer grass and management approaches that could save you producers some money while still meeting the herd's mineral needs. Later on, K-State's Charlie Lee. He'll take a look at competitive hunting of coyotes and other damaging wildlife and why that might be detrimental to public opinion about hunting in general. It's all ahead on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Good to have you aboard for another Agriculture Today on this, the K-State Radio Network. Well, we were away for the Memorial Day holiday yesterday, so we've bumped our weekly cattle market segment back to today. And in the company this time of livestock economist Glynn Tonsor of K-State Research and Extension. And we'll talk over some new numbers from the USDA on cattle on feed, which were more encouraging than what was thought prior to the report. Also look at the latest on the beef export scene. If you look collectively, though, Glynn, at the cash and futures cattle markets last week, they were generally nondescript.
Yeah, on balance, I would call it a ho-hum week. I think that's a combination of positioning and pausing for the holiday just to see what happened, coupled with Mother Nature threw a lot of curveballs to the middle of the country. I probably don't need to describe those to our listeners, but that did shape some of the auction volumes and so forth. But just to give quick context, when we look at the cash market, Fed Cattle 5 market was $115 and 80 cents, down about $1 for the week. When you look at the board, June live cattle was basically flat for the week. A little over 111 was Friday's close. Flipping over to feeder cattle, sticking on the board for a moment, the August contract was $142.5, down almost $2 from the prior Friday. And then AMS called the cash markets, quote-unquote, uneven. That was probably kind. There was -$3 to -$4 examples and a couple examples of $3 or $4 higher. Probably the biggest thing was Mother Nature's impact on operation. And I just made a note, Oklahoma City West actually moved their sale back a day in response to road conditions and rain. El Reno, Oklahoma, one of the reports I read, had over 7 inches of rain in a short period of time. Oh. Even here, closer to home, Manhattan, Kansas, where we operate, there's quite the storms. So Mother Nature was messing with the feeder cattle marketplace quite a bit. But on balance, I would just say it was a ho-hum week.
Really a market that's looking for the next inspiration, to put it that way.
Yeah, and some clarification on product movement. This cattle on feed report was anticipated. We're going to get into in just a minute. There's some growing uncertainty in the feed grain complex related to this weather as well, so corn prices spilling over. So when you add all that up, I don't think it was too surprising that you had a lot of kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting last week.
To that cattle on feed report. And if you look at the numbers on the surface, they might seem discouraging, but actually they're better than what traders had anticipated going in.
Yeah, it's important to, at least the way I think through this, is what's most important is what was reported relative to the expectations. So not the absolute level, because in many ways the market builds in the expectations before the report. So the May 1st on-feed number came in at plus 2%, right on par with what was expected by the analyst. I will note that's the largest on record for this series back to 1996. That's consistent with just the large supply situation we've talked about. April placements is up 9%. That was actually on the lower end of expectations. So this is the number I would hone in on, to your point. Plus 9% is a big change. First off, last year, the April number was a little lower than anticipated, so this sets it up for a bigger year-over-year increase. The range going into the report was basically 8.5% to almost 19% higher placements, and on average of about 13%, we came in at 9%. So that's where I'm honing in on. The fact placements were below what most analysts were anticipating is probably encouraging. You could probably think a little deeper about this. The reason a large placement number was sort of anticipated was for quite a bit of the month of April, if you had some normal basis expectations, there was a profit hedgeable opportunity. Feed grains relatively cheap, deferred live cattle, relatively speaking, were decently priced and so forth. That's what led to a lot of folks thinking we're going to have high placements, coupled with just general availability of feeder cattle. Plus 9% is a large number, but it is encouraging for the back end of 2019 fed cattle prices, the fact that those placement numbers came in lower than we thought. Finally, April marketings were up about 7%, and that was on par with expectations. So the main thing that stands out here, just to reiterate, is the April placements are up. So yes, we have a lot of cattle being placed, but not as many as we thought. And I look to like Q4 of 2019 for that being supportive.
Let's translate that into what you've put together in the latest feedlot returns projections, which you just updated a few days ago. You've been anticipating the losses to feeding cattle to continue to build, and does this report change that in any way, shape, or form?
No, and if anything, there's a reason to get more concerned than maybe a month ago on this. But the most recent projections put out closeout projections through January of 2020, so the balance of 19, the first month of next year. And looking from May all the way out to January, what I'm currently putting out there is for a quote-unquote average cost producer that this situation reflects, who did not implement any hedging at the time of placement, is losses of $100 to, there's actually a couple cases where you're crowding $200 losses per steer, closeout per month. What's core to that is cost of gain that are crowding $90 per hundredweight and cash fed cattle prices that are in the 110 to 117, 18 price, depending on what month specifically you're looking at. So the downward pressure we've had over the last month on fed cattle prices doesn't help us. The upward pressure we've had on corn the last few weeks doesn't help us. But I'm going to hone in even more narrowly is there's lots of uncertainty on what the cost of gain for the rest of the year are going to be. Mother Nature is impacting our ability to plant. What yield's going to come from the crop that is planted and like those things is a little outside my wheelhouse of expertise, but I do understand that less grain in the ground or lower yield is supportive of grain prices and therefore bad for feedlot operators. That's embedded into some of the bearish tone in these projections.
Swinging back, Glynn, toward the positive, the latest cold storage report released last week, it does have some semi-favorable numbers to it.
Yeah, I would call this a neutral, if not positive, report. The beef numbers came in, stocks are down 5% from the prior month and down 9% from the last year. So before we look at the competing meats, that is definitely a positive story. We know more beef is being produced, but yet it's not stacking up in the freezer, is how you interpret that. That's a good thing. On the pork front, stocks are up 2% from the prior month, but down 2% from a year ago. And then poultry's up 2% from the prior month and about flat with the prior year. So even when you look at the total meat complex, the cold storage report, I think, is supportive. Now, keep in mind, these are year-over-year changes and month-over-month changes I'm referring to. We still have a fair number, in absolute terms because we are in an up cycle of meat production. But we have a pretty good ongoing story on we're exporting quite a bit despite some tariff challenges and so forth. And if anything, this report says we're managing to do that, but maybe the prices aren't what we want. But we have to keep doing that through 2019. The only way for that feedlot profitability story we alluded to improve is either for those feed costs we talked about to come in lower than I'm currently projecting, or for us to have a fed cattle price boost. And that hinges on the ability to keep moving beef.
And speaking of that, and you have a post on agmanager.info on this very point, the monthly update on beef demand domestically. Well, again, a more encouraging note here.
Yeah, so beef domestic demand was up both in January and February and then down in March. There's a lag, particularly on the trade data, so I can't speak to April yet. There are some concerns on that front that we need to monitor. When we look at the other competing meats, pork was actually positive all 3 months in the first quarter, so that's very good. Chicken was up January and then down February and March. There's very positive consumer sentiment. So domestically, that's good. The unknown is, again, Mother Nature's throwing a curveball, but to the extent we're going to get a grilling-based demand boost is still a little bit unknown. Yours truly has grilled less in the last few weeks than normal. I'm not representative necessarily of the whole country, but we need to monitor exactly how much lots and lots of rain and adverse weather has muted the grilling demand spike, and that will probably show up in the May, June, maybe even July outcomes when it comes to domestic demand.
Of course, there's an ongoing interest, Glynn, in what's happening with our beef exports. And to what magnitude does the industry need to worry about this?
Well, it definitely needs to be monitored. I will remind everybody 2018 was a really good year. So all our comparisons are, compared to a good story. So year-over-year changes can look bad simply because you're comparing back to a high base. And in many ways, that's what's going on. But in aggregate, the volume of beef exports for each of the first 3 months this year are down per USMEF's numbers, specifically Canada, Hong Kong, and then what is called the other. So the combination of the smaller destination countries are down each of the 3 months. China, Mexico, and South Korea are up all 3 months. I will insert here, most of our listeners know this, there's lots of ongoing discussions what trade deals we are not in or which ones we might be in, what the current tariff rates are and how they compare to our competitors. We could talk in lots of detail about specific markets here, and each of these markets has its own unique characteristics. But I want to put a broader bow on this is 2018 cattle prices were a lot higher than we anticipated, in large part because exports exceeded our expectations. At the moment, there's reasons long-term to be optimistic that we can get back to that story in 2019. But the first couple months, just the volume traffic are not in the same trend of that. Some improvement on the tariff front or just better trade relations could very quickly turn that tide, if you like. And I'm highlighting this because there's lots of discussion specific to pork, for example, and tariffs on products going into Mexico. But you've got parallel issues that are specific to beef on our Asian partners in particular, and then Mexico and Canada as well, that we can't lose sight of. And they're equally important for the beef industry, not just the pork industry, because we do have large volumes of meat being produced, and the ability to export some of that and relieve the volume that we're asking domestic consumers to purchase is very important for the bottom line prices our producers receive.
So beef exports could cycle back around, but they need a nudge of some positive sort here.
Yes. A nudge is a good way to put that. Is I think there's several candidate nudges out there. I'm alluding to the kind of terms of trade part, even just a positive development on the macro economy globally. There's growing discussion about European economic conditions not being what we want them to be, Brexit uncertainty. There's a lot of those things hanging over the markets in different ways. Any of those that got clarified and or became positive could be good nudges, and fingers crossed that it happens sooner rather than later.
It will be a welcome shot in the arm for these markets, to be sure. Glynn, as always, thanks for the analysis. We'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks for having me on, Eric. On
this week's Cattle Market segment, livestock economist Glynn Tonsor, K-State Research and Extension. We'll return shortly with more on Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
Agriculture Today continues now. Beef cattle producers with stock out on grass. How much management are you investing in your herd mineral supplementation program? Well, our guest says that you may want to reevaluate that. Jaymelynn Farney joins us via phone. Jaymelynn, as you know, is a beef systems specialist for K-State Research and Extension. She is based in southeast Kansas. And Jaymelynn, cattle producers understandably fall into something of a routine year by year with their pasture mineral supplementation programs. But you contend that this deserves more than just casual management, to put it that way.
I really do, Eric. Interestingly enough, mineral nutrition might be the most complicated and least understood component of ruminant nutrition, especially in the grazing animals. Primarily because we always want to think about mineral nutrition comes entirely from that free choice mineral out there. Free choice mineral supplement intake is very highly variable. And when you are out on grass, our forages are constantly changing quality throughout the year.
And therefore, one needs to perhaps adjust accordingly as those forage resources change?
Yes, you most definitely need to. And as anybody who's bought mineral in the past couple of years noticed, our prices became a little bit more stiff. Mm-hmm. Each forage type offers different types of minerals naturally. So on your tame pastures, especially your cool seasons like fescue or brome, that you might be applying some fertilizer to, that fertilizer in turn can change the amount of macro minerals supplied. Calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, salt. And so when you apply appropriate fertilization and you have good growing conditions, depending on what type of class of animal you have, you might be able to meet some of those macro minerals just from the grass. However, in any type of grass, salt, which is one of the most important minerals for cattle, it is deficient in any type of grass. So we always have to have a salt available for cattle. And a majority of the trace minerals or micro minerals like copper, selenium, cobalt, zinc, iron, manganese, they might all potentially be low in any type of pasture, but definitely in your tame grasses.
What about the warm season grasses, though? Do they provide a little more across the board here to the point where one can be simple, to put it that way, with their mineral supplementation?
Well, your warm season grasses, during that spring flush, we have a very high phosphorus level. You might be able to get away with just a 2% phos mineral at that time, which is a good thing because phosphorus is one of the most expensive single components of a mineral mixture. During the dormant period, and as those warm seasons begin to head into dormancy, phosphorus is severely deficient in those forages. So if you're looking to feed your cow-calf operation, you might want to have two different minerals. A low phos mineral for your springtime through maybe middle of summer, and then go to a higher phos for late summer through winter to allow you to have a potentially more consistent intake, because phosphorus is also one of a more unpalatable form of mineral. And once again, salt and several of your trace minerals, really regardless of season, in warm season grasses, they're deficient. Your calcium, zinc, and phosphorus, depending on what time of year it is, could meet cattle requirements. So, really being cognizant of your phos levels can help keep your costs down. Making sure you have salt and trace minerals is a good management practice for your cow-calf operation, even for your stockers.
Now, minerals can be available in multiple forms. Talk about those alternatives and what each of those would bring to the table here, Jaymelynn.
And that's another component that makes mineral nutrition rather difficult, is you have to make that decision of which of these are going to meet your cattle requirements and also being able to be a cost-effective method. So each of these chemical forms responds differently in the animal. In general, your inorganic forms are the least bioavailable. When I say bioavailable, that means that's how well the mineral is absorbed and being able to be utilized by the animal's tissues. So in general, inorganic has the lowest bioavailability, and then organics have more. But even within your inorganics, the form, such as oxides are the very lowest in bioavailability. Sulfites have a higher bioavailability, and chlorides are more bioavailable within the inorganics. Within your organics, you can have a chelate, you can have an amino acid complex. As you can just tell, there's a lot to think about.
Right.
And as you get more bioavailability, in general, you also get more price for these type of minerals. So you have to kind of determine which one to do. And luckily, by law, the type and form of mineral needs to be listed on the ingredient list. And on your ingredient list, they're listed from greatest to lowest inclusion. So you can tell what you're actually offering to your animals.
Now, there is this third possibility, using an injectable trace mineral. The advantage there is more along the lines of assuring that it is taken up.
Yes. There has been some recent data out of Kansas State looking at a medicated mineral that had CTC in it. About 25% of the cows that were trying to consume a free choice mineral with CTC in it did not have a detectable level of CTC in their blood. So that can indicate to you how many animals potentially never touch a free choice mineral. So most of the time, without doing some liver biopsies or blood tests, you don't know which ones have touched mineral or not. So that's the managerial benefit of the injectable trace minerals. They're easy to administer. You know you're specifically giving them an amount of trace mineral, and you know every animal receives it. Now, there is some variability within research projects as to whether you do see improvements in health or reproduction from these injectable trace minerals. And that's primarily been driven by the fact that if your cattle are on a mineral that's very palatable and they are consuming it, then that added trace mineral didn't lead to improvements in pregnancy rates or health.
So that said, a producer might want to stick with the approach of free choice. Maybe one can handle free choice availability a bit differently to encourage consumption and encourage a positive response, you say?
Yes. So year-round, we do need to offer some form of a mineral. Once again, salt and most trace minerals are deficient for cattle regardless of forage type. So I just kind of have 3 simple guidelines for year-round mineral feeding. 1, you could just feed the same mineral year-round. That is the most common management practice, especially in cow-calf operations. The concept behind that is that you feed a free choice mineral that supplies close to 100% of the animal requirements throughout the year. However, intake is going to be very, very variable off of that, just due to what the forage type is. And everybody really kind of knows that. There are certain times of the year your cows just inhale the mineral, and other times of the year where they hardly want to consume it. So if you're really having trouble with maintaining a consistent intake, split it up into 2 different minerals offered each year. Maybe go with a low phos mineral in the spring through early summer on your warm season grasses or whenever you have that spring flush or very rapid growth. So if you have tame grasses, your rapid growth also might occur a couple of months earlier than our warm seasons. As they go into dormancy, go into a higher phos mineral. That 2-mineral approach might allow you to have a lower year-round mineral supplementation cost, but it also makes it easier to include approved antibiotics and insect growth repellents in those minerals. Another management practice could be a free choice mineral when your cattle are a little bit further away from you. You might go and observe them once a week, etc. You can put out a low phos mineral, and then when you bring your cattle in up close for getting ready to calve or during a dormant period when you're feeding your cows, if you're feeding your cows any source of a daily grain, put your mineral in that daily grain. That is the way to have the most consistent mineral intake.
Jaymelynn, we appreciate the comments and the information right here, and we will catch up with you again soon. Many thanks to you.
Thank you, Eric.
Jaymelynn Farney with us. She's a beef systems specialist for K-State Research and Extension on mineral supplementation for grazing cattle on this part of Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today continues now here on the K-State Radio Network. Eric Atkinson with you. Well, this spring's planting decisions haven't come easy with the vagaries of the weather, the fluctuating markets, and now the USDA's revised market facilitation program. The department releasing its proposal last Thursday afternoon, $14.5 billion of direct payments to producers, with the rate based on a county-level trade impact and the total acreage a farmer plants to eligible commodity crops. According to the director of the Center for Commercial Agriculture at Purdue University and former K-State agricultural economist Jim Mintert, in a webinar, they've tried to structure this in a way that doesn't necessarily favor switching to soybeans sooner, which is what a lot of people were worried about, says Jim, but it does suggest that people who get toward the end of the soybean planting window might wind up stretching that window a little further. Again, the USDA has not released the payment rates, which it says will be based on the trade losses at the county level. We're planning to have with us right here on the broadcast tomorrow the state director of the Farm Service Agency for Kansas, David Shim. And David will have the very latest details on that market facilitation program as it's coming together. So be tuned in tomorrow for the FSA's David Shim with the latest on that program. Because we were away for the holiday yesterday, we owe you this week's edition of Tree Tales, and with a special event coming up as Bob Atkinson covers for this go-round on Tree Tales. Bob?
On March 25th, 1893, a newspaper article appeared in the Oskaloosa Independent featuring a champion black walnut log that was grown on the farm of P.W. McGowan in Leavenworth County. The log was purported to be 21 feet in circumference, 15 feet long, and contained 3,000 board feet of lumber, and was 572 years old. It became part of a Kansas exhibit at the Chicago's World Fair. Kansas has a long history of producing impressive black walnut for a prairie state. To promote the current management and care of this tree and other valuable hardwoods, the Kansas Forest Service is hosting the National Walnut Council meeting on June 16th through the 19th at the Prairie Band Casino and Resort just north of Topeka. The 4-day event features educational field tours and indoor sessions from nationally recognized experts in natural resource management. The meeting brings together landowners, farmers, natural resource professionals, scientists, foresters, and forest industry professionals to network and discuss the most pertinent issues associated with the successful growth and management of American black walnut and other fine quality hardwoods. The meeting begins with an evening reception and a social hour at the Kansas History Museum, a good introduction to Kansas. Field tours will include sessions on agroforestry, tree and songbird identification, wildlife and woodland management, sawmill and harvesting demonstrations, and much more. Indoor sessions will include discussions about fire and oak regeneration, tick-borne diseases, and a variety of woodland owner show-and-tell sessions. The deadline for early registration is June 5th. Registration for the full event is $175 with single-day registration options. Additional information and registration may be found on the web at walnutcouncil.org by clicking on Events and Annual Meeting, or by simply calling the Kansas Forest Service at 785-532-3300. This is Bob Atkinson encouraging you to take advantage of this great opportunity to learn more about the importance of our Kansas woodlands by attending the National Walnut Council meeting. You've been listening to another Tree Tale.
Thanks, Bob. And now, our regular Tuesday feature for you dairy producers, Milk Lines, with K-State dairy specialist Mike Brook. Mike?
Today I want to visit with our Kansas dairy farmers concerning our planting situation with corn that we might be utilizing for corn silage on our dairies. With the recent rains and likely forecasts of increasing rainfall in the coming weeks, we may have an issue with when we actually get into our fields and get some of the rest of the corn planted across the state. As we think about silage, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that, in general, as we look at corn hybrids that have longer maturity lengths, that also means higher yields of silage in the fall. So as we look forward to silage harvest in the fall and we consider some of our options, do we go to a shorter maturity day length for our corn hybrid because we're planting later, or do we push silage harvest later into the fall season? As we push later into the fall season, obviously there could be some issues with an early frost. However, at least in recent years, that's not been a huge risk here in most of Kansas. So we might still be okay planting those longer day hybrids. Just keep in mind that your silage harvest window might change significant, probably by at least 2 weeks and more likely by 3 or 4 weeks due to delayed planting. Also keep in mind as you start to make your selections, look back at the recent history, at least in terms of heating degree days and how that affects maturity. In many cases, our summers have resulted in fairly warm temperatures and increased heating degree units. Therefore, corn matured much quicker than what we maybe had expected. This could be the case again this summer, and again that would help those hybrids that are long season and planted later than what we might expect. Again, as you look at those numbers, consider that in making your decisions. If you do move to a shorter day hybrid, keep in mind that you probably are also reducing your potential tonnage yield, which means you may need to increase your acres that you plant. It's also important to keep in mind that we do have some alternatives. We could switch to some forage sorghums for some of our forage needs. Again, those are generally shorter day maturity, and we still have lots of time to plant those, so delayed planting is really not an issue with sorghum crop at this point. As we also look forward to some other summer annuals that we might be able to plant, that might include something like millet. Again, not a high yielder, but something that would give us some tonnage if we're looking for something toward the end of the summer that we haven't yet been able to accomplish in trying to get enough forage together for the coming winter. We still have time to plant corn. We have options available in terms of selecting hybrids that have shorter day length, and we also have the options of different types of forages that we could raise, such as sorghums or millets, that might extend our forage growing season even though we have late planting. This is Mike Brook with K-State Research and Extension.
Many thanks, Mike. You're tuned to Agriculture Today. K-State's Charlie Lee is in next. This is the K-State Radio Network. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Agriculture Today returns now, and once more we visit with wildlife specialist Charlie Lee of K-State Research and Extension. Charlie, this week to fill us in on coyote eradication contests, or killing contests, if you will. Are these competitions common?
Well, those type of competitions are held in at least 45 states. It's starting to be viewed unfavorably by many states. These are organized competitive events where the participants often compete for cash or some sort of prizes for killing animals in a specific location during a kind of a specific time period. They're conducted on a wide range of species like coyotes, raccoons, crows, wolves, prairie dogs, and the management of these contests and oversight of those contests is maintained by typically the state wildlife agency where they are participating.
So they're sanctioned, in other words.
They would be sanctioned. These would be events that would follow normal hunting rules and regulations, but the outcome would be a short period of time with a prize. And because of that, the prize, animal rights groups and animal activist groups oppose these events and are starting to get more and more support to stop these events. California outlawed all predator hunting contests in 2014. New Mexico prohibited coyote hunting tournaments just a month or so ago. Vermont stopped them in 2018. New Jersey, New York, and Oregon are all considering some form of ban on these types of contests. And typically, the participants compete over a day or perhaps a weekend to kill the largest animals, the most animals, or the heaviest cumulative weight of animals, and then they win some sort of prize which is paid for with entry fees to participate in the contest. Oftentimes, predators are the common target. They are deemed as an animal that we need to greatly reduce numbers or eradicate, and the opinions on whether these are biologically important or not widely vary. I look at it as it's a form of hunting. It's certainly not a biological necessity to hunt, and it's not a biological necessity to have these type of contests. There's certainly a lot of different reasons that hunting is important, but the competitive event perhaps is what makes this somewhat different than what we would normally do in a hunting situation.
So you wouldn't really consider this approach, these competitive formats, as a means of damage control either?
No, they're really not damage control. Keep in mind, these competitions are viewed with widely different perspectives. Some view them as a game of just taking animals, which may devalue or disrespect the prey. Others can view them as a management tool to solve problems on a localized situation. But most of those contests aren't designed to focus like that. They're usually over a broader area. Keep in mind that hunting can manage wildlife populations, but it has to be done with situational awareness. You have to know the parameters, the area, and focus the needs. And if the prey numbers are what's limiting the number of predators, or the number of predators limiting the number of prey. So there's lots of different perspectives on whether hunting manages populations. I can't envision very many situations where these type of competitive events are managing wildlife populations on a very large area, because they're just something that doesn't occur very frequently. It doesn't take very many animals out of the population, but it certainly garners a lot of media attention.
And you think that is the bigger question here, the optics of these events, the spectacle of them may send the wrong message to the public as far as hunting in the more traditional sense.
Yes, I think that the general public probably portrays these competitive events in a negative value. We already have a lot of challenging aspects to continuing hunting in the form that we've enjoyed it for many, many years. And I think these probably don't do a lot to garner more support for hunting. I'm fully aware that we're not concerned about killing too many animals with these. It's mainly the public attention that these types of events draw, and how many people are opposed to them because they look at them as perhaps unethical and something that is really not necessary.
So it's quite a quandary. There's a popularity to these, obviously, amongst certain enthusiasts. So you're asking that folks step back and just consider the implications of these kinds of tournaments?
Well, I look at this as more as an ethical issue than a biological concern. Everyone's ethics are somewhat different. Ethics and morals are something we could debate for many, many hours and probably not always agree on which it would be. Hunting certainly has some management implications. It's natural. It can be done in a humane manner, and it's been done forever. Everyone out there is a predator or prey at some point in their lifespan. And hunting is an important tradition for many people. It has a very strong heritage here in the Great Plains. Hunting can benefit other wildlife species, but these competitive events are different. So I think the issue becomes, should hunting be a competitive event? I certainly think that it can provide some benefits as if we're getting new hunters involved with these events, but I think perhaps we're missing the point somewhat if we have to go to these competitive events to get new hunters to our sport.
Well, it's a subject worth contemplation. These sanctioned events, competitive hunting of coyotes or other species, and whether or not these send the wrong signal to the public about the value of hunting wildlife. Charlie, thanks for the look at this today. Charlie Lee is a wildlife specialist with K-State Research and Extension. He's along with us every Tuesday right here. And our time is away for today. Again, this invitation to check out our podcast service, where you can listen to the broadcast at your convenience or have it automatically downloaded to your mobile device every weekday. The details at agtoday.net, agtoday.net. And please be back with us right here tomorrow, won't you? Until then, Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.